Awesome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for our final day. Today is the last day is very different from the first 2 days, where we all get to figure out our plans for the next PI. And so today we have both roadmap presentations, workstream breakouts, and reporting. But just before that, we'll have a product council presentation from Leslie Ann, leading into the roadmap presentations. And just as soon as the roadmap presentations are done, we will have the opportunity to take a screening. So I'll invite all of us at that point to come on camera and just smile with us and wave so that we can take a screenshot of all of us who are here. Thanks again for joining. So that said, I will pass it over to Leslie Ann. Over to you.
Hi, everyone. So this is a small opportunity. I'm going to show you some stuff that we were doing at Product Council over the last quarter and just kind of connect it back to what we said in January, the last time that we presented. So let me just share my screen. Hopefully that's showing okay.
Yeah, we can say it. That's good.
Good. Okay, super. So I'll start by saying Product Council is a completely open forum right now, and anyone who wants to know more about these kind of things, come find me. The links are in Team Up to the meetings, all these kind of things. And I want to say very clearly, product management is a team sport. There is no such thing as one person doing all the product activities. And I thank those who are coming and being part of Product Council and getting involved in things like the marketing steering group and all the rest of it, because there is so much work to be done. So just a reminder of what I showed right back at the start. The mission in a product function is to think about where are we, where do we want to go, what changes, how are we going to get there, how are we going to measure progress. And it's impossible to do all of these activities every single PI. But what we've been focusing on this PI more, I think, developing propositions, for example, around the merchant story that you heard. And we've been looking a little bit at the portfolio strategy and product. We've been evangelizing a lot. I've been doing a lot of meetings with various folk, for example, with the hackathons we mentioned yesterday. And we've had out the back of that various deep conversations, high touch conversations with various folks. And we're fundamentally looking at, well, how do we as a culture and a community work better together between business and tech? That's been a big part of our conversation. We did kick off a little piece of work with some of our partners in the consultancy space. We don't think a lot about pricing in the modular community because we're not launching a product, but we do think about is benchmarking of cost. And as such, we're doing a little bit of work with some folk to look at those who are doing business cases out there in the world for national payment switches. How do they think about open source? And how do they model that into their story? And is it a good way that they're modeling it into their story? And how might we help them think about open source solutions? So things are happening. A reminder of the kind of big audacious goals we set at the start of the year from a GTM perspective, like how do we know as a community we are moving forwards and making progress? And we put together the concept of wanting 3 closed user group pilots, 1 real money commercial implementation starting to scale, 3 training or venture or hackathon or tech sprint style organizations working with us, and sustainable quality community growth. And fundamentally, we thought about, well, what do we as a product need to do, a product team need to do? We think we need to remove friction, we need to look at cost reduction, we need to deliver features that help adopt traction, and we need to make sure that we're ready for production from this secure performance at scale. And I think you'll see that that's aligned to everything that you've heard in the last 2 PI community events. That's fundamentally the focus of the community. There is an advocacy funnel that I'm looking after. Fundamentally, there's a lot of conversations across these 4 types: hub operators, schemes, advocacy partners, and technology companies. And they all have a different way to approach how we think about modular, and the questions that they ask are different too. But we have fundamentally a funnel here of people who are just at the start of kicking the tires through to really looking at the soft launch. And that's how we'll start to measure whether we're moving in the right direction. But 2 big questions that come up all the time and often. How do we get traction in any one market, and how do we do this in a repeatable way? Because product is about productization. And I think fundamentally these answers are where we're at right now. We need to get to real money ASAP, which means DFSP engagement, scheme design, coding those missing components that we've been talking about. Being able to demo helps us to project how we think about the world, rather than it being a what do you want, what do you get, what do you want, what have you got kind of conversation. That's actually helped by bringing thought leadership to the table. Is Zoom okay, everyone? I just got a message saying start my video. Can you hear and see me okay?
We
We
can
can
hear you.
see.
Yeah.
Your
Yeah.
camera
So,
seems not to be on.
oh, okay. So maybe my
No,
there
it
we
is,
go.
that's
Okay,
it.
so
Yeah,
there we
yeah.
go. Super. Okay. And so how do we do this in a repeatable manner? We've done it now a few times with various deployments as a community. And so how are we learning from what we're doing and putting that back into the product is critical to us moving forwards. And we've heard a lot about it this week as well. And the concept of get started quickly playbooks, reference manuals, advocacy work around demos so that people understand what the product is and what it isn't as well. And making it simpler for a scheme to get started with certain propositions like the merchant proposition and with something faster ready out of the box in terms of configuration. I've also said this a few times this conference, diversity of skills really matters. And doing this well is about recognizing that technology is not just about software development, but it's about the business analysts in the community, the user experience designers, the service designers, maybe from an API perspective, project managers, testers, product owners, all have a role to play. And we need to make sure that we're valuing the contribution across the board of all the work that gets a product out the door. So thank you very much for everyone who is doing work like this in work streams. But there's more to do. So this is my standard call for help in the community. I wanted to show you a little bit around that framework, what's happening. So we have outbound activities, and you can help if you think about supporting the market steering group with subject matter expertise and ideas for things that should be prioritized in their backlog. You can provide useful content for amplifications by the comms team. For example, yesterday you heard Warren and I talk about the need for us to talk about our security model and why it's different and why it matters. That needs people who really believe in it to help get that content to a level where we can talk about it publicly a bit more with execs. And we need to support also things like PowerPoint designs for standard exec presentations, web designers and technical content writers to help us with our content uplift, and even resources to build the developer portal content with Lewis around the APIs of product and things. There's so many ways that someone with technical skills and knowledge of this story can contribute as well as writing code. This is a rough backlog that's being run by the some of the other teams. As we've heard some of today, but there's also the marketing steering group that you might not have heard from this time. Similarly, you are helping me with supporting and validation of proposition development, supporting of hack events to do discovery around things like 3PPI, do they work, all those kind of things. We need to watch and learn as these events happen and make sure that we bring the learning back into our product. We need to create the assets around customer sales, customer feedback and sales feedback and those kind of things. And we need to input into market analysis and business case assets, where I said, this is starting to happen with some of the work with Delberg and Glenbrook that we've been kind of doing meetings around. Inbound activities, requirements, support and development, project management, all these kind of things that we have to do. You are supporting, we can always do more in this space around getting the business process to be content to the right level, providing QA and a test mindset and a review of our test case material, because fundamentally that defines the product. If what we're doing in regression tests defines what we believe our product is. Creation and review of product reference material, providing a real world use case written material, getting involved in work streams as a product SME domain expert, and peer review of product artifacts. There's lots of ways product people can help in the workstream process upstream of the software delivery and also after software delivery. How do we actually get the feedback loops going and the refinement going? So here's some of the activities that are happening and the kind of things we need help with. But please come find me and we'll talk about lots of these things. So we started Product Council last October. We had these brands at the table. I'm not sure where the black one comes from. Something's gone wrong there. Um, but fundamentally, maybe it's changed a little bit over time because the markers who sustains and who keeps on coming every Product Council. This is who was able to attend at the last Product Council. And I think it's really clear how these brands are fundamental to the success of Modulip today. These are brands that are invested in getting Modulip to market. And I think there might be more brands than this at the table. I would like to get this brand of contribution, this board of contribution at product level back up to the kind of the previous level. So how do we grow product improvement sustainably? Well, I think there's three elements that I'm seeing come out from the work that I'm spotted in the last quarter. I think it's obviously via adopters and their enterprise partners. It generates demand for our partner network. We'll get better product when we learn with feedback from, you heard from Works, fundamentally, how do we make our product better? We work alongside those who are making it happen in the market like that. I think we'll also get improvement in our product via the marketplace and pre-integration approach. And that's why I'm quite excited about what we're doing with Payment Manager and what it might mean for pre-integration and marketplace, plus the reference architecture. How do we make it simpler for external complementary tools to do the right thing? So our first example, of course, is Actio with the FRMS team. And also, I think via support of open innovation programs. So that's a big change this quarter for us at the foundation, is to start to work a little bit more with folk at Monetary Authority of Singapore around a central bank digital currency initiative, fundamentally for wholesale settlement. But they're running a hackathon event right now. They're calling for proposals, and it's a design sprint format that will lead to a problem statement that is sponsored by World Bank around G2P. How do those who don't have smartphones and already have account services provided in last mile by banks, MFIs, telcos, SACCOs, how do they access G2P payments where they want them? And how does government still benefit from the programmability of CBDC along the way? We believe that there's a story there for us to collaborate with other communities. And this is where the 3PPI API could be a really networks of networks moment of interoperability for us. So I'm hoping that by being part of that ecosystem, that we will grow our product, will improve our product, right through to checked in code. But fundamentally, you hear me say improve our product. And what I mean by that, because I'm at the lens of market requirements and market adoption, I think very heavily about getting the whole way through the value stream, not just developing code and having a POC, but it's checked into the mainline GitHub branch. It's been tested in the market with at least one adopter before it's then available to anyone who wants to use Modulip as an established process. And I think I've added in there recently reference architecture and playbook content updated and things like that. And this needs to be refined. This fundamentally needs to be refined as a model that we all agree to as a value stream in our community. And we need to also figure out the way to get incremental improvements via this UAT and beta testing with at least one adopter process. For example, on 3PPI, how do we know we've done well? We take it to market and we make sure that there's a backlog of small improvements based on the foundations that have been put in place. So there's a visual of the kind of work I see going on in the community at this URL that we will bring into GitHub, which fundamentally maps the kind of things that you are hearing this quarter. We are working obviously on this sandbox thing where we're doing some showcases. We have the reference architecture as a documentation framework. But then we have fundamentally better business processes on V1. We have financial workflow changes on V1. We have the V2 Core Hub proposition that we're trying to build. And then we have all of our tools, things like the payment manager, how do we actually think about a roadmap of stuff around those tools? We have the 3PPI service, which has got lots of showcase over the line down this value stream, but there's more to be done. There's things like the PISP Get Started guides, there's the updates to the training program, all those kind of things. And we know that we've got work streams thinking about improving multi-currency and things. So you can see here that what I'm trying to do is build a story that helps us as a community map our work stream activity to an overarching product story. So what's changed this PI? Well, actually, one of the big things that we did this PI was introduce some new templates. We want transparency through our product lens of what is happening down in the work streams. And as a consequence, it's easier if we have a standardized reporting format that links back to the PI planning goals that are set at these community events. It's a way for new community members to engage at a bird's eye view with what is happening. It ensures we're tracking risk and lessons learned through a product lens without needing to study the GitHub backlog. And a stretch goal of this is to use this format to go to community meetings with objectives already in mind, based on activity that's already happening in the community in preparation for the next phase of work that needs to be done. We also identified a visual of the product and aligned the workstream activity similarly, but it really does need to be reviewed again in the light of the three others that were presented this PI, and I'll show you what I mean in a minute. Fundamentally, we need a coherent map of our product, like the table maps that we've had it before, but fundamentally we need to make sure that it's aligned with what we're doing with reference architecture and how we talk about things in the training program and on our website. We've been creating new material at exec level. What we've definitely found at exec level, the people who are making the decisions and the buyer decisions, they don't have the attention span to go and say, go look at our training program. It's really important that we signpost and we consider a success if the exec material sends people and diverts people to the training program. But there is a need for us to have material at an exec level that helps that funnel get unblocked towards the training program. Training program is fantastic when there is a little bit more of the decisions have been made, but we do need to make sure that we're helping decision makers to choose a modular approach. We fundamentally commissioned a security grade sandbox project for one of our adopters as an experiment to see also how this approach might accelerate modular to market. So that's quite an exciting little initiative that we're looking after, and we're hoping we'll be able to talk about more of that and the outcomes of that by the next PI event. So watch this space. And we're supporting the MIS CBDC hackathon that I mentioned, and DFS Labs also with a sandbox next quarter. And we're working to determine the right links to support African Nenda as well as a consequence. So fundamentally, we're really thinking about that start of the funnel and how does our product get talked about in market. But when you map that to work streams, a big part of what we were doing this quarter was thinking, how does this map? So fundamentally, this is a framework. All models are flawed. This is a model that we're going to try to use for now until we get some V1, V2 reference architecture kind of conversations underway, where we might change it again based on how the bounded contexts play out. But fundamentally, I think we have the core clearing system capabilities teams. We have core clearing use case propositions and extensions teams. Then we have adjacent tools and marketplace teams, and we have support tools that are the kind of things that are helping product advocacy work. You should recognize within that that is exactly how our work streams are working this quarter, and it's also how we approached the community event this quarter in terms of how we want to talk about different initiatives. Some of them are more advanced than others, like and some of the teams have leadership already. So one of the fundamental things about work streams is that they must have the leadership in place to make sure that they get resourced and the work is scoped well. And so one of the things we wanted to do is start to talk about how does that work if you want to put a new team in place, and how does that work from a product perspective. So we have 3 templates in mind. We have a mission charter for a team's work. Then there's a PI goal template for priority workstream activity that the team are working on within the next between community events. And then a status report that will help us understand how that team are doing. And this is not to put PMO style process in place, but it's fundamentally to help us understand confidence levels, what's likely to be true by the end of the PI, so that we can help customers understand the roadmap a little bit more. You've seen examples of this template over the course of this community event a little bit, but fundamentally we want the mission or the charter of a new initiative on that front board to understand what the problem is they want to solve, the expected or hypothesized impact of solving that problem, and is there a theory of change over why this helps us with our ultimate mission of financial inclusion? Because fundamentally this is a B2B product. And so the story is about DFSB onboarding time and all those kind of things. So this is aspirational, and this is the charter that starts a community. I really do want every team that exists like this to make sure they have a product lead and a technical lead. And the product council is there to support and to enable that to happen. You saw this template from Lewis. This is what I would love to be able to say at the end of our breakouts today, that every team has a single goal, ideally, a few key epics that they want to get over the line. What they're not doing, it's important to know what you're not doing as much as what you are doing and what you will plan to sequence next, assuming that you get the current key epics over the line. And also think about how you define success. We saw examples of that during the week, and all the teams have been talking to me about this. This will lead to a dashboard where what you just talked about in the goals is part of the OKR confidence quadrant, and the activities that you're working on are linked to then how you're going to achieve that objective. It's a new format. We've been experimenting with it for a couple of months. Kim and I are here to help teams get it done. And we've actually been talking about how do we take this back down to an email status update that we update regularly. But the fundamental vision of this is that we get this out the door and we get this visible in GitHub as part of what is happening in the community right now, and therefore what's going to happen next, and get a roadmap up the door. So what we're looking at in terms of product work for the next quarter, we're going to review the product council charter. We're going to have a working collaboration zone for ideas management and collaborative product work. We're going to support the creation, hopefully, assuming the documentation team and the training team are up for it, of a website zone for newcomers to product council and workstream goals and roadmaps and exec content that links to everything else that you've heard about this quarter. We want to build this value stream contribution plan for technical wins, and we want to support workstream activity with people that, from the product perspective, make sure that there's enough support from a domain perspective. I am going to finish there, but I wanted to say fundamentally, I keep being asked, what is our product? And that's why some of the things that we're talking about are priority to us. So this is the visual that we've been using at the exec level from Product Council around what exactly is our product and what is it not. And the fact is that it's the red blocks here, and not everything is part of what we offer. Customers need more than what we will ever offer to get to market with their adopters. And that's why our partner network is so important, to make sure that the gaps are being filled. But there are gaps in our red boxes. We know that there's definitely stuff that we need to change. And fundamentally, what I'm loving seeing come through from the work with some of the adopters like Myanmar is that we will have an updated finance UI portal, even though it's not part of our core product. The API-centered clearing system is an example of helping adopters get started with some UI and some best practice business process, which is really quite exciting. This is a slide from the slides that you saw earlier in the week. We also had these kind of visuals from the trainer program of what our product looks like that are completely different, but really valuable as animations that help us explain how the protocol works. We also have views of our product like this on our Modulet website. And we also have visuals like this from from the technical standpoint we saw this week. So there's a moment of going, how do we make sure that our story ties together and that we have visuals that kind of coherently build on each other and make sure that we've got a table map that makes sense for the future. Because we've also got this visual now too, which is simple and not the same as the others that are there, but similar. And we need to kind of consolidate on some of these visuals. One more from the week is the layered approach that came through in the business process teams work. So I'm hoping that we can drive something that consolidates on this through this lens, which is our lens for today, which is the roadmap presentations. I think you will find that these teams are effectively who's going to present next. Not all of them will present for a breakout session. And that is because fundamentally we know that 1.1 and 1.2 are huge projects that will take a lot of our key critical resources. But we have proposed that 2.2, the merchant scheme extensions that are offered, were talked about by Paul, really does need a community effort to get it off the ground. So there's people that don't want to be part of the VNext implementation and the business operations framework. I would say, please come and be part of that work stream. There's also a fourth one, and I'm trying to spot exactly what it is. Anyone help me from the hosting team? What is the other one that we proposed today? Kim, do you know?
For today?
Yes, the fourth one, the fourth breakout today.
My bad.
We have reference architecture, business ops, ISO 222, and merchant screen.
Yeah, so 1.1, 1.2, 1.4, and 2.2 have all got a breakout slot if people want to go and be part of that conversation. And that's to set up the goals for the next PI for those 4 teams. But that does not mean that the rest of the teams are less important, or that their work, for example, our sandbox work is already planned in 4.1. Fundamentally, it's just about us managing resources. So everyone will have an opportunity to present their PI goals, but they may not have a breakout session today, and that's just fundamentally about our about our resourcing perspective in terms of critical resources and how many people are on the community event today. So with no further ado, I kind of want to lead the cross to the presentations, and I think Kim and Simeon are going to lead those in terms of ordering.
Yeah, I'm fine with going. Thank you very much, Lizanne, for that. Appreciate kind of the context for everything. And I'm fine with moving into whoever's ready. I think I know that the reference architecture, we can just go in the same mode that we did for the presentation. So if Pedro and the team want to get ready, we can have the reference architecture go up first.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Kim. Let me start sharing. Can you guys see my presentation?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Well, I'll start by saying that you've probably noticed that we're at a stage where the next version's name is not yet decided. So we use VNext and V2 interchangeably. They actually mean exactly the same. So in this slides, you will see V2. This is exactly what Leslie Ann was referring to as VNext. So we're at this stage where naming is not yet decided. As you know, that's one of the most difficult things to do in computer science. So since last PI, we have completed the reference architecture, and we're now busy cleaning up our working documents so that we can release a more friendly set of documents for everyone to consume. Those documents are open, but they are not ready to be consumed. They are pretty long, pretty difficult to understand. So what we're doing now is shaping them up in a way that it's easy to understand. So because we have that reference architecture, which is a vision of what a good future architecture looks like, this means that we're now equipped to make better decisions regarding the effort that we put on the current version. So if we need to develop critical features, we have a reference of what good architecture looks like, and we can develop it that way and align it, at least in a way that whatever future migration we have for the next version is much simpler, or at least it's possible. It also means that we are ready and we can proceed with confidence to the next major step and start the build of the next version, what we call the V2 of our platform. For that, we proposed an approach with 3 phases over the next 2 PIs. We'll start with an alpha release, and this is the result, and this will result in the first development that we will do. We'll culminate with what we will include in it is the happy path use cases. They will be obviously feature incomplete. It will include the new architecture structure. along with the interfaces and the separation of concerns that we've been working on, and all of those advantages, we will focus on making it fully testable with just enough performance to make sure that what we're building is still holding on the promise of scalability and performance, but we will not optimize for it, as I mentioned 2 days ago. And the objective of this release is to allow developers to start developing new features against the new release whenever it is ready. This is a very important step because it allows us to do changes to the current version with confidence that we can later migrate to the future version of the platform. And we now have a fully formed build plan for this alpha release. And with the development team fully staffed, we expect this alpha release to be ready by the end of next PI or PI 15. Now, we need to get this done as fast as possible because once we release V2 alpha, everyone can start developing features to V2 or migrate meanwhile building features. This is a very important step. There's obviously a period between when we start building V2 alpha and when we release V2 alpha, where the only thing that we have to help guide any other development on V1 is the reference architecture, and that's a very good value. What we want to make sure is that we get a dedicated team to release as fast as possible V2 alpha so that people can start shaping up their code, shaping up their functionality in whatever other extended software that we have around modular can be retrofitted and migrated to the new version. So the promise of the next version of modular is that we have these long-term benefits that we have always in our mind when we're designing this next version. We'll keep increasing the automation level of the deployments. As we already demonstrated with the performance and scalability POC, we can make it faster, more scalable, with less latency, so actually more performant at a lower infrastructure cost, and this is really having the cake and eating it. And because the structure is simpler, developers can extend the platform without having to know all the complex details of the core, which is one of the issues that we have today. It's really difficult to contribute and to add new functionalities without understanding all that there is. A lot of the effort that we've been putting on this reference architecture and that will end up in V2 is this separation where everything is nicely separated so that development against this V2 can be much easier. And obviously this is the consequence of the new interfaces and these internal APIs that facilitate integration with external components without having to touch the core code. And again, this is a very important aspect because these integrations with the new interfaces and internal APIs will be a lot less risky in terms of deployment because they won't change anything of the core modular code. So in essence, this strategy will benefit us in the long run by lowering the total cost of ownership, which, as we know, is the important number, is the cost over time, the total cost over time. And to wrap up, we know the objective, we know how to get there, we just need to get started. And for that, we need a dedicated team to develop it, and that's what we are asking everyone in this call. Thank you.
Thank you, Pedro. Appreciate that. And thank you for the presentation. And then I guess the next up is we have Paul Baker or Warren here to basically talk about the business operations framework. Warren, okay, go ahead.
Hi. Hopefully this works. I've been having some internet problems, so I may have to can my video at some point. And I'm going to try and get us to present the and Sharing. Yeah. So as we try and get ourselves thinking and reporting back using the templates we were discussing earlier. We're not going to go in the previous sessions on, but just to refresh everyone's memory, the business operations framework, this is also some of the infrastructure work and will feed in delivering certain components within that match and work with the reference architecture. But we also have to be very tactical in this stream. It's about capturing those best practices and operational models for the business processes. So there's going to be a combination of activities we do here, like Leslie was saying. It's not just all about developing code. It's actually about making sure we have the business analyst and product owner input, that we have operational information that adopters can easily use to deploy and operate the system. Those kind of artifacts are important for us too. But we want to make sure that the underlying core has captured and facilitated those best practices in a way where it makes it safe to operate. So Maker Checker, RBAC, actual role-based security, where the right people can access the right tools to do their job and not have random access to it, that we have operator audit trails and things like this. So all of these elements will deliver into the various binder contexts. And at this point, for this PI, we're starting. And so we're going to start and provide some frameworks, some references, and we're going to be calling in lots of community members, lots of support for actually being able to deliver various elements of that. So we in particular looking for folks that are able to help support us with the user interface, building on top of the core backend APIs, so we can get a full vertical stack to demonstrate the new features. We'll be working with folks, for instance, from the Myanmar project, to show how what they've done can be applied on top of that backend. And we'll have folks like Cybrin who will benefit from the experience layers and projecting that through their user interfaces. And if I go through, I'm getting to, we managed to get this reporting right, sort of accepting for the fact there's lots of green here and maybe a lot of it's amber, rather than green at this point. I'm not sure if I've lost connection.
Warren, we can still hear you. I'm going to turn off your video just to protect your bandwidth a bit.
Okay, great. Thanks. Yeah. Okay, so the objectives here we're working on, we are working on documentation. We're working on, so that's capturing the best practice, and the roadmap for the business operations framework, that in itself has not started yet. I actually need to skip to this one. Yeah. We're looking at the design, controlling those processes, the IAM solutions. We've seen lots of good progress with that, again, from Myanmar. There's been stuff that's happened in the payment manager space, but it's bringing that back into the core and evolving that solution, making it a standard for everything. And this is going to be really one of our main focus areas in this PI, making sure that we have that role-based access control, identity management, and operator audit logs clearly available, because that's like a non-starter otherwise for this type of system. And I think, Paul, we had here somewhere where we had a list of the resources that we were audited. I missed.
Yes, they're in the top priority section on each of the 2 initiatives, Warren. So if you go back a slide.
Okay. Sorry, I'm in Density. I'm not seeing it. Can you talk to me about it?
Could you go ahead a slide? Could you go to the next slide, Warren? So over here, we've got a resource ask for our second objective. Oh, there we go. Yeah. So we really need a set of full stack developers to help fill out that participant lifecycle bounded context and corresponding APIs, and that would be the experience APIs and the macro front ends. And then further effort sort of UX developers to help sort of build out some of that functionality in the participant lifecycle or other bounded contexts to really provide that UX for those UX deliverables into the that conform with the framework. Warren, could we go back to the first initiative? That's 2 slides back. So on the first initiative, we also are asking for help from the community. And there's really 3 parts to that. The first one is we need help with some technical writing. We're able to put some documents together, but there's some gaps, and we'd like to help fill those gaps. And then, although we will be producing an RBAC design, initially the scope of that will be a bit limited. So we're hoping that we can involve the community to help extend that scope. And then this community roadmap that we spoke about in this work stream that really defines the full extent, full functionality end to end of what we want to deliver to hub operators. That overlaps quite significantly with product council and product experts, and we just this is a call to help to the community to really help. So those are really the different types of people that we're hoping in the community would be able to contribute to this work stream. Over to you, Warren.
Okay. Sorry, I think we've said everything we need to say there right now. We will be having the session to dig down deeper into the scope of the activities that we will deliver on against these. We'll be trying to deliver during the next PI. Can we? And yeah, join us in the breakout room and we can go into more details.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate that. So next up, Michael can take the stage to talk about ISO and understand some of the asks there.
Thanks very much, Kim. I attempt to share my screen. You seeing that?
Yep, we got it.
Fantastic. Right. Okay. So away we go then. First of all, why do we couple ISO and foreign exchange together? You might well ask. Anyway, so taking ISO 20022 first. Overall objective, as we talked about earlier in the week, is to create a reference ISO messaging implementation that any adapter can take and adapt for their own local needs. Oops, pardon me. For this PI, our objective is to create a reference ISO 20022 messaging implementation, but not necessarily one that's sufficiently generalized for any adapter to take and adapt for their own local needs. Our prime objective here is to actually get something working and look at generalizing it, well, I won't say later, but certainly afterwards. Okay, so we've got two major work streams here. The first is to implement a native ISO module loop in a national implementation. And that, as you've probably seen from conversations earlier in the week, is Rwanda. Second, to make the Module Loop Foundation a member of the ISO 20022 standards organization. And I mean a contributing and productive member. So let's look at the first one. We've gone through the P2P use case using proxies. Directory lookup is completely there. Funds transfer is almost there. We just don't have the transfer rejected messages done yet, but that's a relatively short piece of work which we expect to complete any day now. So basically this PI is going to be about using native messages for P2P. Now, we assume that we will need to provide the full suite of 6 P2P messages in ISO format, and that we will need to extend the ISO mappings to include condition of fulfillment and module loop format identifiers. We will need to have new Swagger definitions and new module loop adapter functions for the 6 messages. We then want to look at the P2B use case, the merchant use case, which at the moment is customer initiated. Now, if we assume that there is no variation in the transfer terms, the P2P use case that we've already talked about covers this too. If, on the other hand, we need to support variations in transfer terms, for instance, the addition of fees, we will need to add some new message types to support conversion to and from the FSPI op quotes messages. For native messages, since we've already said in order to manage native messages, we will need to have all 6 messages in place. The P2P use case covers this too, so there won't be any additional work to do to support the P2B use case. So which that gets us to a version of Module Loop which demonstrably and natively supports an implementation of the ISO 20022 standard, which I think is what we call done for this PI. So next up, joining the ISO 20022 standards organization. We've taken our first steps. We made a formal application to join, as we've said. We'll need, obviously, to respond to requests in support of our application, and we're prepared to do that and expecting to do that. But otherwise, there isn't very much, I think, that we can do to influence the timeline on which this happens. The ball is in the ISO standards organization's court, and while we can respond to any requests, we can't do very much to accelerate things. In the meantime, we are going to work on the business justification for the changes we need to make to the current ISO messages to support our require men, who are the little men who actually go and do these things. We've also made a request to the Module Loop Foundation for additional support from a subject matter expert in the ISO field, already a member of ISO 20022 committees, and particularly the ones that we will want to join, so that we can improve the quality of the submissions we make sure that they are properly aligned with what ISO is expecting, and also increase our influence in the ISO community. As we said earlier in the week, our plan is not just to be a passive member of the ISO community, but to make a real difference and to make sure that the ISO community makes a greater response to the sorts of customers and the sorts of needs that Module Loop is focused on. So that's that side of things. Now, what do we need to do for FX support? as we said earlier in the week, we've got a detailed proposal. It's been reviewed and approved and has been outline approved by the API Special Interest Group. So for the next PI, our plan is to get approval for the API proposal from the CCB, to get a detailed switch code proposal for changes in the switch that we will need to accommodate the new proposals for foreign exchange currency conversion. They're not great, but of course we need to do something detailed, and we need to understand, everybody will need to understand what needs to happen there. We will need a detailed reference implementation plan for a foreign exchange provider so that they can understand what it is that they need to do in order to join, in order to participate in the modular loop scheme as a foreign exchange provider. And our plan then is to have a simulator version of a foreign exchange provider available for demonstration so that we can show prospective implementers how a modular loop scheme does foreign exchange. But that might be a little too much to swallow for this PI. So that's, we're going to put that in, I think, as a stretch goal. And that's all I have to say on that topic.
Any questions?
Of course, I'd be very happy to take questions and discussion in the
we're going to
discussion
say
group.
some of that. Okay, so let's next up, Paul. We're going to talk about the Merchant Scheme Accelerator, and then from there we're going to go to breakout groups.
Okay, thank you. Are you able to see my presentation, or is it a different screen entirely?
We're good.
Okay, great. Now, I apologize in advance. I have by no means as slick a presentation as the previous three that you've seen. Hope you won't hold that against me, particularly as I think that this is equally as important as the other three. I definitely would seek your contributions here. So I want to talk about merchant scheme extensions. Persuaded, there we go. So what we want to do is to deliver a set of merchant scheme extensions that will help any modular loop adopter take best practice in ubiquity to market. By that we mean we want to create a set of extensions which sit around a deployed modular loop hub and support merchant payments of various types. I mean, we've talked extensively about QR, and we've already done a lot of work around QR codes in this environment. We've talked about the standards, talked about interoperability, and we've talked about the old question of static versus dynamic QRs. We've got a lot of work in place on that already. But that's very much a front end, and it cannot just focus on QR codes. We also have to address the reality in pretty much most markets where we're going to have a deployment of USSD, and we have to support that as well. So the initial architecture we've come up with will actually splits off the front end, whilst having an architectural element within it to support specifically QR codes and dynamic QR codes. So I think we've come up with a flexible approach. So the reason I think this is important is that yes, there are core use cases, transaction types that every deployment has in mind. They're usually around G2P or loan disbursement, loan repayment, the classic ones. But once you've got those in place, what do people actually do most transactions for? Is buying things, market stalls, roadside merchants, large supermarkets, whatever it may be, and giving people a reason to not cash out immediately, I think is quite an important thing. And this is all about that, creating that ecosystem or reaching as much of that ecosystem as we can. We have done quite a lot of work. We've done some detailed requirements documents. This actually came out of the fact that we have a deployment in Rwanda where we are putting a modular loop hub, and Michael's doing a lot of work in the ISO 222 space and integrating that hub into an ISO environment. And we want to put a set of services around that, one of which is merchant payments. There are a number of ways of doing it. We're going to focus there on both QR and USSD, and we're looking at collaborating with a number of DFSP partners there. So we have the documentation in place. We've done a lot of work on the QR code schema, the overall process flow, etc. We really need community support in actual implementation of this stuff. Without focusing too much further on this, I wanted to highlight this conceptual architecture, which really highlights where we need help. The Mojo Loop Hub, that's in place, and it will be extended further. But what we're doing here for merchant payments is not modifying that hub, using P2B transactions through that hub to enable customer-initiated push payments to merchants in an interoperable environment. The heart of this is a merchant registry module, which is all about know your merchant, know your business, various levels of tiered KYB, the addition of extra information around location of shops, all the stuff that you need to spot fraud, spot money laundering, spot fraudulent merchants, and also to protect legitimate merchants against various forms of attack from bad actors, customers, whoever they may be. The key element of this, the bit that orchestrates everything, is the merchant payments extension module. Sorry, my phone's going. The merchant payments extension module, which essentially makes everything work together. And it is independent of any customer front end, be it QR code or wherever, whilst also containing elements within it which can support QR code payments if necessary, for example. The customer front end, we can develop different front ends which plug into our extensions module to enable, in the Rwanda case, USSD and QR code over the same infrastructure. Off the side, we want to extend, we want to find partners who are willing to extend existing initiatives around fraud monitoring, money laundering, transaction monitoring, etc., where that is integrating with the Mojo Loop Hub, and extend it into the merchant registry as well, and new sources of data around business registration, known police activity, whatever it may be, so we can identify fraudulent actors. There's quite a lot of work in there, but actually I think we could get a prototype of this up and running fairly quickly if we limited it to static QR, for example, which is the simpler use case, even if we were to implement what I would regard as the basics around cryptographic protection of QR codes. And yeah, I suppose this is just a plea. We've done a lot of work here, but we really need the community to work together, to collaborate, to deliver what I think is probably one of the top 4 most important initiatives in the next PI. So thank you for that.
Great. Thank you so much for the workstream owners for presenting the different areas. So the next thing we're going to do is, I think we might take a short break, but we're going to go and break out into the 4 different work streams we just talked about. So we're going to have that option within Zoom to go ahead and break out. And we're doing something, I know in the past we've used the Miro board. We're actually just condensing that, since that's a lot of information to do. We're not getting away from the way we actually work as far as doing sprints and PI planning. All of our information will be in GitHub, all our epics and stories for the PI. But to make this an easier way to report out to the team, we're using a standard template, which you've seen throughout this convening right now. And the key areas that we're going to be reporting out is we're going to make sure that we have a goal that we understand. We're going to have our objectives for the PI. So those are the key epics, our objectives we want. And then things that maybe that we're not doing now, but are important. and how is success defined? The other thing we're going to do is have a confidence vote. So the folks are going to be, the workstream owners are going to fill this out, and we come back to the report out. We're going to report out on this page, as well as any discussions that folks want to share that happen in the room. And again, this is just the beginning. As we heard from all the work streams, we really need people's community efforts and participations to get these work streams really going, development efforts, business efforts. So this is really just the start to plan about what resources we have and we can commit to. And then as we move forward into the detailed planning on GitHub, we will go through an exercise to break these down to user stories and commitments. So hopefully there's not any questions, and we can try to start the voting. And I think, I don't know if Alyssa, you're going to jump in and talk about that. I mean, not the voting, the workout breakouts.
Yeah, I'll jump in before Alyssa does.
Thank you.
So just before we do the breakouts, this would be a really good opportunity to take a screenie. So I'd invite everybody to turn on your cameras. There we go. It's always great to see your smiling faces. Some of you have pets, some new faces, some old faces. Miller is in a floral shirt. That would be one for the books.
Oh, you don't see the lines behind.
Yes, I did see Virtual Africa behind him. Oh, this is great. Thank you, everybody, for, I mean, you should probably just wave and say a big hello to everybody. This is so cool. Oh, there we go, nice. And we'll take a quick screenie here. Excellent. Excellent. This is probably my favorite part of the convening every single time. Paula and I often talk about how we can't wait to have you all in person. I've been working with many of you. I don't know how tall or short many of you are. So hopefully, fingers crossed, sometime soon we can be all together again. Thank you so much, everybody, for turning on your videos and seeing your lovely faces and smiles. So just a quick segue into where we're going to go next. If you go into the agenda, so eventually we will leave this session. And if you go into the agenda, there's the workstream breakout session, and you'll have to join the call there. There will be 4 workstream breakouts. Reference architecture led by Pedro, BizOps by Warren and Paul, ISO 20002 led by Michael Richards, and Merchant Scheme Accelerator led by Paul Macon. So what time is it? Actually, we're a bit off. Just slightly off time. So once we end this webinar, please drop off and then hop on to the next one. You know how, by clicking the join meeting, and we will immediately go into the various breakouts. So again, thank you so much. See you in the breakouts.